Hey, it's Thursday and this is where we're at. Everywhere I go, I just find like Star Wars toys or lanyards or like I want a place to sit where there are not toys everywhere. So we're talking about hope this week, and so thought it might be helpful to talk for a minute about hope as an act of living in the present. I think with hope, sometimes it's easy to get a bit confused because we've seen hopeful people, or like what looks like hope, as like people who are always bright-siding things or very confident about the future. They just always seem to like march ahead with this sort of purposefulness. If you've ever like been on a guided tour, it's always like the person up front who's just like, has never been there before, but is doing it so proudly. Oh my gosh, all I can think of is when I went to Israel and the lady named Debbie was like leading the tour. Debbie had never been there before. And I think we get confused sometimes that like hope looks like that. Always sure. It just becomes another substitute for certainty. And Jim Wallis said something really helpful the other day. He has this podcast called Soul of the Nation, and he's been this anti-war activist and delightful Christian lefty forever. And we were talking about how in the Easter season, which is what we're in, that like so much about resurrection isn't just that like Jesus does something, like dies, comes back, these are resurrection hands, but that inherent in that is the promise that God can make all things new. That like, and that's partly why we love to celebrate it in spring with like flowers and bunnies and like the bursting forth of life. It's supposed to remind us that like there will be dormant seasons and that all of a sudden the world can begin again. And one of the helpful things then about the language of hope is that it doesn't require that we be blind to the things that are still broken. The racial injustice, the structural evil that will and continues to crush some people over others, that many of us will remain protected and cared for, and then the rest left out, exposed. That like hope doesn't mean, to be a hopeful person doesn't mean we can't speak honestly about that. That inherent in the promise of Easter is, and in this resurrection power, is God saying that there is a plan enacted through us, participating with us, to love our neighbor as ourselves. That like in the midst of brokenness, that God can still break out in new forms. And so I know this last week has been especially painful for the like, Lord have mercy, God, how can we live in a world this broken? And one of my favorite things about hope is when I hear gorgeous justice seekers say that like hope is inherent in the work of justice, that it's part of the promise that when we march ahead, not like Debbie, just blindly going where she's never gone, that we act in concert with God and our neighbor to say, behold, we are making all things new. So, okay, may we be people of hope today. And I hope it is a beautiful, terrible day.